Heavier Than Heaven, a biography of Kurt Cobain by Charles R. Cross. Picture this. Exactly 6 hours and 57 minutes after an entire generation fell head over heels for him, Kurt Cobain got his first glimpse of what dying felt like. January 12, 1992. Saturday Night Live had just wrapped. Nirvana had absolutely shredded their performance on national television. The kind of raw, electric set that changes everything. Their album Nevermind had just done the impossible, knocking Michael Jackson off the top of the charts. This complicated, painfully shy 24-year-old had somehow become the biggest thing in music. Talk about your reluctant kings. But here's the thing nobody saw coming. While America was still buzzing about what they'd just witnessed, while his fiancée Courtney Love was fast asleep in their New York hotel room, Kurt was preparing a syringe. Way too much heroin. Dangerously too much. He pushed the needle into his arm, and within moments his skin turned this sickly green color. His breathing just stopped. He tumbled off the bed, landing face first in a pile of clothes on the floor. Hours later, Courtney would find him, not overdosed, clinically dead. She went into full panic mode, punching his chest, throwing freezing water on his face, doing everything she could think of. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. He came back. Think about that timeline. In one single day, Kurt Cobain was reborn as a cultural icon, died alone in a hotel room, and was literally brought back from death by someone who loved him. If that sounds too wild to be true, well, that pretty much sums up his entire existence. This is the real story behind the legend, meticulously pieced together by Charles R. Cross in his biography, Heavier Than Heaven. Cross wasn't just some random writer either. He was the editor who gave Nirvana their very first cover story. He spent 4 years tracking down over 400 people, determined to understand who Kurt really was. Today we're going way beyond the rock star image. We're diving into the story of a sensitive kid from a tiny logging town who dreamed big, achieved everything he wanted, and then discovered he couldn't handle what he'd wished for. We'll explore the deep scars that fueled his incredible art and the crushing weight of fame that felt, to him, heavier than heaven itself. By the time we're done, you'll understand the beautiful tragedy of how one of the most important artists of his generation was created, and ultimately, destroyed. Kurt Donald Cobain entered the world on a rainy Monday in February 1967, in Aberdeen, Washington. Picture a small logging town where the forests crash into the Pacific Ocean, a place of rugged beauty where the constant rumble of logging trucks provided the soundtrack to everyday life. His young parents, Don and Wendy, were over the moon. He was the first grandchild on both sides, this gorgeous baby with piercing blue eyes that even the hospital nurses couldn't stop talking about. Those early years? Pure sunshine. His Aunt Mari wrote a school paper describing toddler Kurt as this happy, beaming baby who just thrived on love and attention. The kid was brilliant and charismatic, with this incredible artistic streak from the get-go. By 5 years old, he could draw pretty much anything he laid eyes on, creating these amazingly realistic sketches of Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. Music ran in the family, and Kurt was obsessed with their jam sessions. He'd sing along to the Beatles and the Monkees, making up his own lyrics as he went. He was so connected to his family, so full of life, that bedtime would make him cry. As his aunt put it, he just didn't want to leave them. He was this joyful, sensitive, incredibly attached little boy, and then everything shattered when he turned 9. 1976, his parents divorced. For Kurt, it wasn't just a split. It was, in his own words, an emotional holocaust. The security and love that had been his entire universe just unraveled before his eyes. Like so many kids, he internalized it, convinced somehow it was his fault. That happy, smiling boy retreated deep inside himself. On his bedroom wall, he scrawled this heartbreaking poem. I hate Mom, I hate Dad. Dad hates Mom, Mom hates Dad. It simply makes you want to be so sad. That moment, that divorce, became the defining wound of his entire life. The boy who used to fight sleep just to spend more time with his family now felt abandoned by them. His grandmother called it his year in purgatory, but honestly, it stretched into a lifetime of feeling unwanted. He got shuffled between his parents, new homes, never feeling like he truly belonged anywhere. When his father remarried, Kurt felt completely betrayed. He'd made his dad promise not to remarry, and when Don broke that promise, Kurt's hope of his family getting back together died. Suddenly he was competing for attention with a stepmother and step-siblings, an outsider in what should have been his own home. Things with his mother Wendy weren't any better. She got involved with a guy who could be violent, and Kurt felt helpless watching it happen. He both pitied his mother and resented her for making him feel that pity. These people who'd once been his heroes were now fallen idols he couldn't trust. This deep sense of abandonment would haunt him forever, creating this fear of scarcity that no amount of fame or money could ever fix. There could never be enough love, because he knew firsthand how quickly it could all vanish. As Kurt hit his teenage years, he started this long, lonely journey, bouncing between relatives, houses. Over the next 4 years, he'd live in 10 different homes with 10 different families, but none of them ever felt like home. He was the textbook latchkey kid, this sensitive soul just drifting through a world that seemed to have no place for him. He became withdrawn, quiet, sullen. That's when he discovered his one true sanctuary, music. For his 14th birthday, his Uncle Chuck gave him a choice, a bicycle or a used electric guitar. For Kurt, it was a no-brainer. That cheap, second-hand guitar became more than an instrument. It became who he was. He carried it everywhere, even to school. Around the same time, he discovered punk rock after catching a local band called the Melvins, playing a free show in a grocery store parking lot. The music was faster, more energetic than anything he'd ever experienced. In his journal, he wrote, "This was what I was looking for. Ah, punk rock. I came to the promised land of a grocery store parking lot, and I found my special purpose." He threw himself completely into music. He listened obsessively to punk bands, learned their songs, started writing his own. Music became his escape, his voice, his one shot at creating a world where he belonged. But his home life kept crumbling. At 17, after fighting with his mother about bringing a girl home, she kicked him out. His belongings stuffed into garbage bags, he was homeless again, but this time it felt permanent. This period spawned one of Kurt's most powerful myths. He'd later tell journalists he was so unwanted he had to live under a bridge near his mother's house. The story became this potent symbol of his abandonment. While he did hang out there sometimes, the reality was even more heartbreaking. He survived by sleeping in heated apartment building hallways, or sometimes in the waiting room of the very hospital where he was born, sneaking food from the cafeteria while pretending to be a visitor. He was a ghost haunting the places that should have been his sanctuary, a fugitive in his own hometown. Through all this chaos, his will to survive, what he'd later call his will of instinct in a song, was incredibly strong. He made it through. And his artistic life was blossoming. He formed his first real band, this noisy, chaotic group he called Fecal Matter. The band didn't last long, but it produced a demo tape that Kurt passed around to friends. One of those friends was this tall, lanky kid named Krist Novoselic. Krist was one of the few people who heard something special in Kurt's raw, noisy songs. He had this little demo tape and it had Spank Through on it. Krist remembered. "I thought it was a really good song." They started jamming together, Kurt on guitar and vocals, Krist on bass. They cycled through drummers and went through this ridiculous list of band names like Poo Poo Box, Spina Bifida, and the Stiff Woodies, before Kurt finally settled on something he'd seen on a late-night TV program about Buddhism, Nirvana. It meant, he explained, attainment of perfection. In 1987, at 20 years old, Kurt left Aberdeen for good and moved to Olympia, this quirky college town an hour away. He moved in with his girlfriend Tracy Marander into this tiny apartment that quickly filled up with his art projects, his collection of weird dolls, and a whole menagerie of pets, including cats, rats, and turtles. For the first time since he was a little boy, Kurt had something resembling a home. Tracy became his benefactor, supporting him financially while he devoted every waking moment to his art and his band. Life in Olympia was incredibly creative. He'd spend his days watching TV, practicing guitar for hours, and creating these bizarre, often disturbing pieces of art on the backs of old board games. He filled journal after journal with poems, cartoon drawings, and the dark, imaginative stories that would eventually become his lyrics. Nirvana started playing parties and small gigs, slowly building a reputation for their loud, chaotic, intensely passionate shows. They were raw, they were messy, but there was something captivating about them, especially their frontman. As quiet and withdrawn as Kurt was off stage, when he performed, he completely transformed. Their big break came through Sub Pop, this fledgling Seattle-based independent label. The co-owner, Jonathan Poneman, heard Nirvana's demo and offered them a deal. In 1989, they released their first album, Bleach. It was recorded for just over $600, money loaned to them by another musician, Jason Everman, who briefly joined as a second guitarist. The album was this raw, sludgy mix of punk energy and heavy metal riffs. It wasn't a massive hit, but it put them on the map. They started touring relentlessly, first across the United States, then in Europe, alongside their label mates Tad. A British promoter cleverly billed the tour as, quote, heavier than heaven, which perfectly captured the sonic assault of both bands. The tour was brutal and shoestring, with everyone crammed into a tiny van, sleeping on floors, barely making enough money for gas and food. Kurt hated it. The constant travel, the lack of privacy, and the physical exhaustion took a toll on his already fragile health and mind. He was suffering from this chronic, debilitating stomach condition that caused excruciating pain, something that had plagued him for years and that doctors couldn't figure out. The pain was so intense, he later wrote, it brought him to the point of wanting to end his life. During this time, his relationship with Tracy fell apart. She'd been his anchor, but as the band consumed his entire world, he drifted away. The breakup was another source of pain, but it also unlocked a new level in his songwriting. He started a new relationship with Toby Vale, a drummer and feminist zine writer from the Olympia punk scene. She was intelligent, political, and deeply embedded in the indie culture Kurt desperately wanted to be part of. He was completely infatuated, but it was turbulent. Toby wasn't looking for the kind of deep, all-consuming love that Kurt craved, and their eventual breakup devastated him. That heartbreak, though, became the unlikely fuel for his greatest success. In the months after the split, Kurt wrote a batch of new songs filled with newfound rage, remorse, and desperation. One of those songs was inspired by a phrase his friend Kathleen Hanna had spray-painted on his bedroom wall after a night of partying. Kurt smells like teen spirit. She was referring to a deodorant that Toby wore, playfully taunting him about being marked by her scent. Kurt, unaware of the deodorant, thought it sounded like a revolutionary slogan. He took that phrase and turned it into an anthem for a generation. By 1991, Nirvana had this powerhouse drummer named Dave Grohl, and they'd signed a major label deal with DGC Records, an imprint of Geffen. They went into a Los Angeles studio to record their second album with producer Butch Vig. The album was Nevermind. The label had modest expectations, hoping to maybe sell 50,000 copies. But when Smells Like Teen Spirit hit the radio, and its video went into heavy rotation on MTV, something completely unexpected happened. The album exploded. It climbed the charts at this dizzying speed, selling hundreds of thousands of copies every week. In January 1992, just months after its release, Nevermind hit number 1, knocking Michael Jackson's Dangerous out of the top spot. Kurt Cobain, the quiet, sensitive kid from Aberdeen who'd once slept in his car, was now the biggest rock star on the planet. And he was absolutely miserable. He hated the attention. He felt his music, which was so deeply personal, was being misunderstood by a mainstream audience of the very same jocks and rednecks he despised in high school. He felt like a fraud, faking his way through concerts and interviews, pretending to have fun when all he felt was guilt and frustration. "The worst crime I can think of would be to rip people off by faking it," he wrote in his final note. His stomach pain got worse, and he started using heroin, not just recreationally, but as medicine, to numb the physical and emotional agony. He decided, as he later wrote, that if he felt like a junkie, he might as well be one. It was during this chaotic whirlwind of fame and addiction that he reconnected with Courtney Love. They'd first met a couple years earlier, this brief, playful encounter that ended with them wrestling on the floor of a Portland nightclub. Now, they found kindred spirits in each other. Both had endured traumatic childhoods. Both were fiercely ambitious, and both felt like outsiders. They understood each other in a way nobody else could. Their connection was immediate, intense, and all-consuming. "I've met the coolest girl in the whole world," Kurt told a friend, after one of their first long phone conversations. They got married on a beach in Hawaii in February 1992. Kurt wore green plaid pajamas. Courtney wore an antique dress that had once belonged to the actress Frances Farmer. At the time, Courtney was already pregnant with their daughter. The news of the pregnancy filled Kurt with both joy and terror. He was haunted by the fear that their drug use might have harmed the baby, a fear amplified by this now infamous Vanity Fair article that painted them as reckless junkies. The article led to this brutal custody battle with social services after their daughter, Frances Bean Cobain, was born in August 1992. For months, they could only see their own child under supervision. The ordeal was heartbreaking for Kurt, who adored Frances and desperately wanted to be a good father. Holding his baby, he told a reporter, was the best drug in the world. But it wasn't enough to save him. The pressures of fame, fatherhood, his failing health, and his addiction created this perfect storm of despair. In March 1994, during a European tour, he attempted suicide for the first time, overdosing on tranquilizers and champagne in a Rome hotel room. He wrote a note saying he'd rather die than go through another divorce like his parents. He survived, but he returned to Seattle, a changed man. His friends noticed he was more withdrawn, more monochromatic, as if the life was slowly draining out of him. His final weeks were a blur of drug binges, arguments, and desperate cries for help. His family and friends staged an intervention, begging him to go into rehab. He agreed, but after only a couple days at a treatment center in Los Angeles, he scaled a 6-foot wall and disappeared. He flew back to Seattle. The last person to see him alive was a taxi driver who dropped him off at his large, empty house on Lake Washington Boulevard. A few days later, on April 8, 1994, an electrician installing a security system looked into the greenhouse above the garage and saw a body on the floor. Kurt Cobain was dead at 27. He'd died from a self-inflicted shotgun wound to the head. Nearby, he left this long, heartbreaking note addressed to his childhood imaginary friend, Boda. In it, he tried to explain the unexplainable, the loss of passion for the music he once loved, the guilt he felt for not being able to enjoy his success, and the profound sadness that had followed him his entire life. "There's good in all of us, and I think I simply love people too much," he wrote, "so much that it makes me feel too sad." He ended the note with a line from a Neil Young song, a line that would become his epitaph: "It's better to burn out than to fade away." Charles Cross's Heavier Than Heaven is way more than just a biography of a musician. It's this profound, deeply human examination of what happens to a sensitive soul in a harsh world. What sticks with you long after finishing isn't just the rock stardom story, but the story of a little boy from Aberdeen who never truly recovered from watching his world break apart. Kurt's life was this constant search for the home he lost at 9 years old. He looked for it in his friendships, in the validation of fans, in the love of his wife and daughter, and ultimately in the numbing escape of drugs. But he never found it. One of the most powerful lessons from Kurt's story is about this complex relationship between pain and art. His music resonated so deeply with so many people because it came from a place of real, raw, unprocessed pain. He took the shame of his parents, divorce, the loneliness of his teenage years, and the confusion in his own heart, and transformed it into songs that made millions of people feel less alone. But here's the cruel irony. The very sensitivity that made him a brilliant artist also made life almost unbearable. He felt everything too deeply. As he wrote in his final note, "I'm too sensitive. I need to be slightly numb in order to regain the enthusiasm I once had as a child." His story is also this powerful cautionary tale about fame. Kurt dreamed of being a rock star, but when he achieved it on a scale beyond anyone's imagination, he found it was actually a prison. He was this deeply private person who suddenly became the most public figure in the world. He wanted his music to be understood, but he felt like he was being turned into a cartoon character, a product to be sold. His life forces us to ask this difficult question: what does success actually mean? Kurt had all the external markers, the money, the fame, the adoration, but internally, he was in agony. He reminds us that true success has to be about inner peace, and that's something he never found. So what can we take away from his life? I think there are a few simple but profound things to consider. First, take the time to understand your own story. Kurt was haunted by childhood trauma his entire life. His story is this powerful reminder that our past shapes us, and if we don't take time to understand and heal our old wounds, they can follow us forever. It's a call to be gentle with ourselves and seek help when we need it. Second, define success on your own terms. Don't let the world's definition become yours. Kurt achieved a level of fame most people only dream of, but it brought him zero joy. His life is this powerful prompt to think deeply about what a meaningful, happy life looks like for you, separate from external validation. And finally, listen with empathy. The next time you hear a Nirvana song, listen a little differently. Hear the voice of that sensitive boy from Aberdeen, the one who loved people so much it made him sad. Hear the artist who took his pain and turned it into something beautiful, something that connected with millions. His music was his gift to the world, but it came at an immense personal cost. That was a summary of Heavier Than Heaven by Charles R. Cross. We've journeyed through the brightest moments and darkest corners of a truly remarkable life, but here's the truth. A summary can only ever be a map. The real territory, the real emotional landscape, lives within the pages of the book itself. This summary is designed to give you a sense of that landscape, to help you decide if this is a journey you want to take. If anything we've talked about today has resonated with you, if you've felt a pull of curiosity or a pang of empathy, then I encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning facts. It's an experience that offers this profound, often heartbreaking understanding of what it means to be human. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book here on Billionaire's Bookshelf. Let's keep learning and keep growing together.